Welcome back to another Kitecast episode. Tim, my co-host, is joining us. Tim, how are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm good, Patrick. Just counting the days till our AI overlords take over, but until then, all right.
Are you real? Are you an
Yeah.
avatar?
Let's see. Yeah, I'm good. I'm real.
Well, we have a real treat today. We've talked to a number of folks in previous episodes about data privacy, but we haven't had someone who is almost exclusively focused on data privacy, and that's what we have today. She does other things as well, but she's a real expert. Debra Farber is joining us, and she's going to talk about, as I said, data privacy shifting left. What's that mean? Privacy by design. She's a globally recognized privacy, security, and ethical tech advisor and principal. She's the host of the Shifting Privacy Left podcast. So at the end of the program, we'll have her point our audience to where you can find that podcast so you can subscribe. She has almost 2 decades of experience managing privacy and data protection issues and serves as a strategic advisor to a number of organizations. There's a long list here. We're going to talk a little bit about some of them. Privacy Tech, the Institute of Privacy by Design, Privato, SecureV. We'll go through the rest later on in the podcast. She's held a lot of different privacy and security roles at places like Amazon Prime Video, which is, I'm sure, going to be interesting to our audience, AWS, Big ID, Visa, TrustArc, IBM. Man, my resume doesn't look very good, Tim, after introducing her. Debra, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. I always love coming on adjacent topic podcasts because then there's already a foundation for discussion, and then it's a matter of filling in gaps and rounding out the discussion. So
yeah, if you're like me, I'll hear someone interviewed on one podcast, and then they were also interviewed on some other podcast, and I'll go check that out often. And while I'm listening to podcasts, I'm Googling the person's background. I was listening to one last night, a guy that just published a book, interesting character, as often is the case. But talking about interesting characters, let's talk about you and your background. Sure. And let's start by discussing the Shifting Privacy Left podcast. When did you launch it? What's it about? Who do you typically interview on these podcasts?
Yeah, sure. So the Shifting Privacy Left podcast is about it's basically serving privacy engineers, and I'm going to loosely define that privacy engineers as developers, researchers, anyone who's. Let me start. So developers, researchers, data scientists, designers, and anyone, architects, anyone that's working on product development where the product or service is going to be processing personal data. You really need to build with privacy by design, but you can't just use paper to protect privacy like we have for so many years. Laws and policies and contracts they're just not enough. You need to engineer privacy into your products and services. And so privacy engineering is a space that's growing rapidly, and we could talk about that a little later, but it's Privato, the sponsor of my podcast, basically was like, look, we're selling to privacy engineers, but there's no place to go for them right now. Like, where do we go to get in front of them? I've been an advisor for them for a year at that point, and I started the podcast about 15 months ago. So back in 2002, at the end of 2002.
Oh,
and
wow.
There've been about 54 episodes so far. It comes out around weekly, and it is, been successful. It's been my desire to build a community of privacy engineering, and to, there's even silos amongst like data scientists and, that are working on one privacy enhancing technology versus data scientists working on another, right? There's silos across research, there's silos across industry. So my goal is to kind of have a smattering of different technical topics around privacy that you can't find anywhere else, or not anywhere else, but you can't find in most other podcasts that are focused on operationalizing privacy. And so far, it's been a real great ride. I get to have conversations with really intelligent people working on cutting edge stuff, and or who've done like, large scale deployments of anonymization and come to tell the story about it. And so hoping that there's could be lessons learned, no matter what size company the listener belongs to, that they could pick up some insights of what's gone wrong, what's gone right, and use that to in their own practice. So
that's interesting. I've never heard the term privacy engineer. It makes total sense, though.
Corollary to the security engineer, right?
Yeah, it makes absolute sense.
So
it's
big companies have those positions, Debra. So you go to like an Amex or a Visa, there's a privacy engineer or engineers on staff.
Yeah, they're really coming out of, I would say, first and foremost, you see them in big tech companies, because let's just say there's been lots of scrutiny, regulatory scrutiny. There's been, some reposturing of, how the big tech companies are going to be complying with different EU regulations like GDPR and e-privacy, and now the digital services, DMA. I forget what this stands for. But it is now trickling down into other more highly regulated spaces, like in financial services, payments, things like that. But they're being hired from the big tech firms that train them on what is privacy engineering. What does that look like within an organization? And so, it's this weird thing where some of the biggest offenders are the big tech companies, but they are also bringing in some of the and training up, like, privacy engineering capabilities, and people are cutting their teeth on large scale problems there. And so, it's like you have to go and work in the belly of the beast in order to do the good work, right? But I think it's great that at least there's investment in privacy engineering these days. The problem is that there's a huge gap. There's those who've now like been in the space and have been privacy engineers and are getting paid a crap ton of money. Not saying that's bad. I'm just saying that's the situation. And then you've got like, companies trying to hire into that role, but don't even know what they need or what they want, or how what does a privacy engineer do, right? Because you see security and you've got like, a ProdSec engineer versus a DevOps engineer, DevSecOps versus, it's been hyper segmented, and privacy is about 15 years behind security when it comes to maturity. And so there's a lot less of a current, like there's no like privacy engineering textbook out there, right? Like this is in development right now.
Yeah.
There are courses, and there are like, Carnegie Mellon has the very first privacy engineering master's program, and they might even have a PhD program now. I think it's still just master's, and pretty robust. I mean, I think it's like 10 years going, if not maybe 15 at this point. But it's still there's not enough privacy engineers for the demand. Yeah. And then there's also this wild fluctuation in the amount of money that they're demanding salary, since there's such a high demand and low supply. And so
what's driving the demand? All companies have a cost to value calculus that they're going through on every hire and every CapEx and OpEx expense. What fear is driving the demand right now for this role and privacy in general?
Yeah, I would think just like security has used this shift left mantra as well, where it's like, if you address problems before you ever ship code, and you address them early, then you're reducing your risk and the cost of risk and the cost of litigation and the cost of, so right now it's kind of like, look, for years we've been doing this privacy stuff. We've got our breach program. We've got our, pieces of compliance, but we've never really embedded privacy into the business, right? And so now there's two things I'm seeing. One, in the data science world, it's we have all this data, and we want to be able to use this data for analytics and for maybe even for the benefit of the people whose data it belongs to. But there's restrictions around secondary uses of data. You collect it for one purpose, you can't go and use it for another. You'll get fined, get in trouble. Without consent or other appropriate legal means of legal processing. But if you deploy certain privacy enhancing technologies, a lot of them are in cryptography, right? So, homomorphic encryption or even just encryption itself, right? These are tools that you need like technical acumen to deploy or well, we won't stick with differential privacy. For now, we'll talk about, so data scientists want to open up the use of their data. And so one way that you can do that is if you have anonymized data sets, because anonymized data, if it is truly anonymous, and it's very hard to do to have that guarantee be met. But if you can guarantee that your data is anonymous through a process, a mathematical process that is like gonna, assure that it's gonna assure that the privacy is anonymous, then it's no longer considered personal data or personal information under any of the regulations. And so that means that like you can now use that data for all of these things that can make money. Maybe you could sell insights, maybe you can share insights more for research, maybe. So you could show how you're reducing the costs of, the data that you're holding, the costs of the risks around it, by, data minimization principle, minimize your footprint of personal data. And anonymization is one of the ways to do that. And so I'm seeing that, like, I'm just giving an example there for anonymization. Anonymization has its drawbacks as well. Like, you can't keep the relationships, you can't do as many of the insights as you want because you don't have as much of the raw data to be able to use, I guess. I'm not a data scientist myself.
I understand what you're saying. Yeah.
So in one respect, it's like, well, as AI is taking off and such data hungry, LLMs that you need to feed to train and all of that, there's, there are tools out there where you could suppress data from going into your models. You could, but first you have to identify what's your personal data. And from security, you're thinking, what's my sensitive data, right? It's the corollary in privacy is what's my personal data. And instead of looking at the confidentiality, integrity, availability of that data, you're looking at the, potential privacy harms that can happen. And one of the big things is linkability, right? So you don't have anonymous data if you can link anything to that person's identity. So, anyway, the other area is in just bringing products and services to market. So, it's not good enough to just say, well, we have a product we're selling to people that you have personal data. It's like, you look at the cloud space, and it's like the shared responsibilities model that has been so prevalent in cloud, where it's like, we are as a cloud company, we're responsible for privacy and security of the cloud, but you're responsible for the privacy in the cloud, whatever you put in the repositories. The challenge with that is that, like, a lot of the cloud companies haven't been thoughtful about what the customer's need is when, like, how do you delete data? And when you delete data from the system, is it, how do you know it's really deleted or not marked for deletion or not in garbage collector and or being able to like actually take it out of deletion? How do you know, and a lot of that has not been thought through. And so there's a lot of the technical, there's a lot of the privacy risks that we know today, but then we need technical acumen to look at the different, integrating into the different tech stacks, to be able to do code reviews. Privacy engineers are looking at, the appropriate architecture for the flow of personal data and making sure that it's, data minimization is key when you're architecting, so that if you don't collect the data in the first place and the data is plutonium and you need to have hazards, make that safe within your organization, then you don't inherit that risk, right? So there's a lot more risk management upfront before you're ever like shipping the code. And that's what privacy engineers are really focused on. And like security, it's going to be different organizations want different things. So it's actually hard to hire in this area. Some people want, like, I just want an engineer that's going to go build me a data deletion tool, right? Or I just want an engineer, like, that's a privacy engineer, sure, but that's an engineer that's working on creating a privacy product within an organization, as opposed to a privacy engineer that's thinking with privacy by design, deploying with, repeatable, manageable, system design thinking and system thinking. And, so think the corollary of security engineer.
How many organizations, playing off of what you just talked about, have shifted privacy left, right? play on word, from an AppSec standpoint, shifting security left in the development cycle. A lot of organizations, privacy is still a very reactive process. They do it after the fact. It's maybe one of the final steps when you roll out an application, you roll out a program. How many are actually doing it up front today? And how do you, second of all, how do you get organizations to shift it left?
Yeah. So I would say that there's definitely more companies addressing privacy way before the product is actually like built, and they're opining on it when it's still getting built. But I'm not seeing as many engineers being embedded into that process. Like maybe it's like have privacy counsel or the CPOs or someone from the CPO's office come in, and we'll have a meeting talking about the product we want to build and are there any issues there. And I'm seeing a lot of that. What I'd like to see more of, and is still a work in progress, is more privacy engineers literally doing the work of like going to stand-up meetings and working in the product development, like sitting with those folks and like being kind of like the privacy representative in the development team. I think there's a lot more work that needs to be done there. And I think that a lot of it is like there weren't tools that can help with the automation of some of the problems in this space. We could talk about it in a little bit, but for instance, Privado is a company that I advise, and they actually they sponsor my podcast, and they are a static code analysis tool for privacy. So, we've seen that in the security space for years, but it's completely different posturing, completely different, questions you're asking about the data, and it works in the engineer's workflow. And so these things didn't exist. So how could we expect engineers to have, hit the ground running with solving some of these problems?
So that's interesting. Is it looking for, because shift left code is about vulnerabilities, and you got the OWASP top 10 and all that kind of stuff,
right?
But is there going to be I can't think of a phrase for it now, but an OWASP top 10 version for privacy? And does it look for PII violations and things like that?
Yeah, great question. So it's so there was for years a OWASP top 20, I think top 10 privacy risks, but it wasn't vulnerabilities, right? It wasn't something you can test to. It was like high level based on privacy principles, and wasn't very useful as a result. This is something that I've been talking about with Privado and their chief scientist, who has come from the company called Shift Left Security, and is a vulnerability specialist. And he's giving his attention now to the privacy problem, and kind of, so he's someone who really understands how that was done in security and is now doing it in privacy. While there's no list of privacy vulnerabilities right now, there's definitely like the tool, what Privado does is they're looking at like the APIs and seeing, all of a sudden these data elements are now being included where they weren't previously. And so a lot of deltas between, the code pushes and being able to, in the engineering workflow, surface that there's a potential risk and make a decision before you proceed. And so I know there's been some new additions to the product, but generally it's just as you would think. It's like it's in the engineering workflow. You're doing your security vulnerabilities. Then you would go and take a look at this, and it will show you where there's different risks. Now, I know the chief scientist, Sue Chakra, he wants to work with OWASP to create a top 10 list for privacy. I also want to say that there is an amazing threat framework, privacy threat framework out there called Linden, LINDDUN. Each one of those letters, it's an acronym, and each one of those things is a privacy vulnerability category or a threat category. So if you work backwards from like, these are the threats, and here's all the, it came out of like academia, and it's like the best one for privacy that's out there, and people are iterating on it. So I really suggest looking at the Linden model. Even the security threat researchers have opined on Linden model for privacy, and think it's like, really good.
Is it similar to like the NIST privacy framework, Deborah, or is it more comprehensive?
No, it's probably closer to more of a security threat modeling framework, which I'm not.
Or the shift left approach, right?
Yeah. And so with this threat modeling framework, I'm like, well, this is great. This is basically like a vulnerability. I mean, threat modeling, but it's a vulnerability like framework. So if we work backwards from that, it's what are the controls that we need to achieve these, prevention of these vulnerabilities being exploited. And so I'm working right now. I'm a member of the Institute of Operational Privacy Design on their risk control subcommittee, and we are working to create a basically an equivalent of the NIST 853 controls list for security, which has been actual controls, not like high level risk statements, and create something similar for privacy, and that'll include things like maybe some privacy enhancing technologies you can use and deploy, and and certain actions you can take that can be helpful. So there's going to be a lot of working backwards from work that's out there already. I bring this up because I think we can also use Linden to work backwards to create, like, here are the risks that you could see, like linkability, or I don't want to go through those now. I'm going to open up a can of worms if I start like listing out the risks. I think there was a question still unasked about that you asked me about privacy engineering, and I don't remember what it was, but I'd like to circle back to it if you remember.
No, it was what's the driver?
Yes.
Of the investment, because somewhere somehow there's bean counters in all these companies going, well, if we invest this, we will either save this or gain this. It's got to be, the equation has to be there. So I'm curious what
it's true. And I mean, I could talk about external factors, different regulators in the EU affecting US large companies and their behavior. But it could get into a really deep, long discussion. And what I do want to say I'm seeing a lot of in order to get this shift left mindset as a driver is that you could save a crap ton of money if you just stop making the mistakes up front, right? Like, think about not only how much compliance work you have to do if you collect all the data just for the sake of it. Well, you have to do more data privacy impact assessments. You have to do more, compliance, and compliance isn't privacy. Compliance isn't security. Compliance is just saying is getting the docs together to prove you are doing that stuff.
Right.
And so, what I'm seeing is like, if you minimize your data up front, you have fewer risks, you have fewer fines, potentials of breaches, and then most importantly, you have, not most importantly, but like most expensive is outside counsel. I mean, you can spend a lot less money on outside counsel and outside firms, like, your large consulting firms, because you are narrowing the scope of what you need to
the dollars
protect.
Are huge.
And so I think the ROI it's just like security. It's save money by just being more mindful up front and doing the risk assessments up front. And
do you think we'll see a equivalent in the privacy area like we do with security in regards to the IBM data breach report that's been published 15 years with Poneman? You think we'll see something like that in the data privacy realm?
Well, so, the funny thing is data breaches was the privacy realm. It literally, back when I started in privacy in 2005, it was like our only driver that we had to like get change in the organizations. When it was like, what's a cookie? I mean, this was like, everything was so new back then, right? We don't have the like breadth of the space we have today. And breaches were kind of like the main driver of change for privacy. Once that moved over to security, where it was like, a breach of a system equals most likely could be a breach of personal data. It became the realm of the security officer, and then it became the privacy officer's realm of just messaging it and reporting it because privacy laws require it. So I would argue that like Poneman was a privacy institute. Poneman Research is a privacy institution. But then it just became like, the realm of security. So I wouldn't say we'd have a separate breach report, but there might be additional metrics that are things that we'd be able to measure. I haven't had an episode on the show yet on metrics, but they need to, a lot of the times the metrics that are created in companies are just spinning our wheels like, oh, we created, we addressed 500, DSARs today. And it's like, okay, but how's that helped privacy, like, so there's metrics for the sake of metrics, and then there's metrics for, what's going to help move the needle in your org. And while the breach report does a great job of both scaring teams in a good way, to like, giving you real data that's actually like, oh crap, there might be a lot of risk here that we now need to address in our org, and we don't want this to be us, and like, I don't find that that's what moves the needle in privacy. I find, especially when what we're trying to do now is get more involved in product development and being thoughtful about the repositories we're putting data in and maybe the use cases for it. And so that's really more like, I'm focused more on how could we get into engineers' workflows, and how could we have product owners see us as enablers as opposed to, blockers. And I think those are the areas that are going to speed up and make, putting everybody on the same page. Like, here are the downstream repercussions of if we do these things wrong. I don't think any engineers out there like to get like, well, no, we just want to violate privacy for the sake of it. I think a lot of the times these privacy violations in organizations are just a lack of knowledge, and it's just like nobody trained them, or and so it's how do we embed privacy into the organization so that everyone's on board, that this is for mission critical, we're obsessed with the customer, because privacy is not about the data, right? In the end, privacy is about preventing harms to people. And the data that we have on them is basically like they entrust that to us, and we want to make sure that there's no downstream harms to them. And that should be the thinking, because who could argue with that, right? And so that you just have to I think there's just needs to be a reframe in organizations. We need to get out of this like, well, legal needs to own privacy. I don't think that's the right approach. I mean, we don't have legal owning security. I think it's a controversial statement I say often, but I actually think that lawyers owning privacy early on has been the reason, and like holding on to it as like, this is ours, we determine the privacy stuff, has been one of the blockers to shifting privacy left for the last decade plus.
Yeah, that makes sense. I wonder if the privacy industry will follow a similar trajectory of security. Like if we think back, security kind of started in the cybersecurity, like the 70s with the mainframes, and where the passwords were, there was an admin password and the password was admin. And from there, we've gotten to where we are today. But in that process, security's kind of gone through this, like you said, an inhibitor, which drove shadow IT. And then the dynamic became, well, how do we be kind of an invisible security layer so we don't hinder productivity and business needs? And, all of the complexities that come with being a business driver, not a business inhibitor. It's probably going to follow the same challenges in the privacy domain, just 5 to 10 years behind, I'd imagine.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm thinking more like 10, 15 years behind.
10, 15, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. And then it's also funny because people, it's like, oh, all right, well, privacy is just this simple thing, just, encrypt stuff so that you don't, you just encrypt it and there's a control. You don't, you're good. You don't have to think about it anymore. And I think GDPR really, for better, it has made, because GDPR covers data protection, not specifically privacy only, but data protection. And data protection includes, many rights that EU citizens enjoy. Privacy is one of them. Security stuff is another. And so data protection is also something under the purview of the CISO. And so if the CISO has to be in charge of data protection, which is basically a lot of the security components in the EU, they had to become more knowledgeable about GDPR and then learn the distinctions between the privacy requirements and security. That really educated them, I think, that privacy is bigger than they thought it was. Because in the past, it would be like, security and privacy work together, but it was more like security was the technical side. Privacy was just, maybe operations. And now we're getting to the point where it's like security teams are realizing they have privacy obligations as well, but privacy is larger than security. It's not a subset of it. And so I think that it's been more of an educational tool in organizations. So it's starting to become more, instead of that's not my problem, someone in privacy needs to deal with it, right? It's definitely becoming more collaborative. in organizations like big and small, because more understanding of what privacy is. Oh my gosh, please don't ask me what it is right now, because it could be its own episode.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
You and on your LinkedIn profile as well, I think you've done a podcast or two on this topic. I don't know anything about this, so I'm looking forward to your answer. You have privacy by design versus privacy enabling technology, abbreviated PET. You guys are very good in the privacy realm, like we are in the security realm of using acronyms. We have hundreds, right? But talk a little bit about the differences between those two.
Yeah, actually, there's significant differences. So privacy by design is originally a set of 7 principles, high-level principles about how you go about designing privacy into your systems. That created by Dr. Ann Cavoukian, who was the former privacy commissioner in, I think it was Ontario, but it was one of the Canadian provinces, and it's been around for a long time now. People talk about, you got to do this. Basically, it means embed privacy into your business. Like, the very first one is like, aim for a positive sum game. It's not privacy versus security, right? It's together. It's like, how could we bring them together to effectuate like the goal of whatever we're trying to do? That was the first principle, right? So it's like real high level principles. But I do want to point out that GDPR has taken privacy by those 7 privacy by design principles and made it mandatory, and it is in legislation that you must build with privacy by design. So, what does that mean exactly, and when have you failed at that? Is right now going to be a matter of court filings and stuff. But in principle, it's embedding privacy into the business, right? It's design it in from the beginning, and you can't do it at the end and just add a box of privacy on, with just contracts and terms and service and what you have to build the capabilities in. So it's really that high level thing. What we're trying to do at IOPD, the Institute of Operational Privacy Design, is really put rigor behind that. We've already created a standard for a process standard for when you, like, if you go through this process, you have built with privacy by design, and that we're currently working on the certification standard, so you can then prove that you get a certification for having done that process, right? Because there's companies out there that are like, we really want to prove that we've done this and have some sort of public statement on that. And so this is that.
So this will be like a SOC 2, but it will be driven by the private sector.
It'll be, so it's open sourced. So and it'll be driven by the private sector. Agreed. So the idea is you'd get a seal, you could display on your website, you could, but you would have to, there'll be auditors that will be trained on the standard. It doesn't exist yet. All we have now is the standard. We don't have the certification standard. And then, so the realm, it's shaping up, but I just, right now, I want to make the distinction between the need to embed privacy by design into your organization, and then privacy enhancing technologies. So they're called PETs or PETs. Privacy enhancing technologies really can help you achieve compliance with the data protection principles, particularly with like data minimization, purpose limitation, and security. They can help you with protecting individuals' privacy and effectively implement data protection by design. So whether you have a specific PET or you combine them, whether it's appropriate for your processing of personal data is going to depend on, your use case, your set of circumstances. So you should really consider implementing PETs at the design phase of any project, when you're doing a data protection impact assessment, which is like mandated for certain high risk uses of personal data. And so PETs they're particularly suitable in the context that when you're involving large scale collection and analysis of personal data. So you think AI applications, IoT devices, cloud computing services. And then there's so many of them. I'm just going to list a few of them. But like anonymization, we all know about. Pseudonymization, we've heard of. But homomorphic encryption, secure multi-party computing, private set intersection, federated learning, trusted execution environments, zero knowledge proofs, differential privacy, and synthetic data are just some of the PETs that are currently either deployed, like anonymization's been deployed large scale, whereas homomorphic encryption is still, even though it's commercially viable, it's still gaining its sea legs. And then there's, obviously other ones that are in the labs and they're still working on. And so it's this really robust area where there's so many tools coming out that can enable you to achieve whatever your business goals are in a privacy preserving way. And I think that's exciting because, again, this goes with ROI, where you could really say, if we're deploying these tools, not only can we then say that we are more protecting privacy better and message it and be able to demonstrate our compliance, which is the accountability principle under GDPR. You got to demonstrate that you're compliant. But it also reduces downstream compliance costs and the costs of lawyers and the costs of the paper chasing, right? Pushing around the paper. So even things as like if you tag your data up front in good data governance practices, right? And you tag it at the development stage, which is something that Privado enables, then you don't have to go search for your data later, with data discovery tools. And instead you could just use, search to pull up the data you're looking for, to find the information around it. So it's really just about being thoughtful early on, so that you could reduce risk, reduce costs, increase privacy, increase your privacy posture.
Got it. Cool.
Exciting stuff, right? I mean,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
excited. I don't know if you could tell how jazzed I get about talking about privacy.
I found it amazing that you were able to rattle off all of those subgenres of privacy.
I had notes. I had notes here. I mean,
okay.
I'm only like telling folks because I do have ADHD and I want to make that normalized. And so I always have, for my own podcast, I have like my script of questions up there just to make sure I'm staying on topic. I wanted to do the same being a guest on your show.
Nice.
Oh, that's three of us, so we're in trouble.
I started a thing and then I stopped the thing, but I want to start the thing again, which is
Sure.
I like to rattle off a few statements and have the guest just say agree or disagree. You can elaborate if you want, but you don't have to. And just kind of compelling, intriguing, whatever statements, just to kind of close the podcast. So I've got, 4 or 5 if you're ready. So just agree or disagree. All right. So first one, most consumers willingly trade their privacy for convenience without understanding the true cost.
Agree.
Yeah, okay. Governments should have backdoor access to private encrypted communications to ensure national security.
Disagree.
Okay, good. Anonymous data collection is a myth. Nearly all data can be de-anonymized with the right tools. I knew that would be a tough.
It's probably it's an agree. I'm still just getting my own research around that. It tends to really support agree.
Yeah. Okay.
That if it's not today, that if it's anonymous today, it might not be anonymous tomorrow. Is basically the way that I see it. It's kind of like if something's secure today, it might not be secure tomorrow.
Sure.
So it's kind of with anonymity, it feels a little more like an arms race.
Oh, that's a good way to put it. Yeah. So another one, social media platforms are more invested in user privacy than most people think.
I agree. Today.
Yeah. Because they got in trouble.
That wasn't always the case. However, I mean, the largest numbers of privacy engineers are in like the social media companies, and this is true because now they're trying to demonstrate that they can bring trustworthy, systems to market. But I still think that a lot of their business model is privacy violative. So even though they might have all this great privacy research and expertise, and bringing other products to market, a lot of just their ad-supported violative like surveillance business, approach is one giant surveillance machine. So. Yeah. Apparently we only kick and scream when it's TikTok in China, but not when it's like, billionaires in the United States.
Yeah. Okay, so last one. We didn't talk about this at all, but I can't close a podcast without it. Artificial intelligence poses the biggest threat to personal privacy in the next decade.
Disagree. Honestly, I think the people bringing it to market have way more, bringing it to market without having the appropriate safety and testing done are treating us right now as human guinea pigs. And that we've never done that in any other area. We don't do that in healthcare and research. We don't do that in any other area of research. And I truly think it's the people screaming about how it's going to be the end of humanity and it's going to, I don't know, violate privacy or whatever, are the ones that are actually going to try to bring that about. Because it's like, if you think this thing's going to eat your face, don't go and put it on your face. It's like, I don't understand. I think that you could totally, I'm so for AI, but bring it to market in a way that like is ethical. And I think it's a ruse and it's a red herring in the way that they're screaming about potential future annihilation from it. It's all AI is stuff that humans have programmed and trained. So it's a matter of what we're programming it and training it on. So that statement there is I think it could be used and it could be, dangerous and bad for security and privacy. I mean, we're already seeing new security threats as a result of, AI.
Those data privacy standards you talked about, if they're applied correctly, they would encompass AI.
If what was applied correctly?
If those the data privacy standards we talked about, if they're applied correctly, they would cover the AI risk.
It's true. But if they were applied correctly, then the business model that like OpenAI came to market with wouldn't have happened. Yeah. Wouldn't have happened. Yeah. Right. So it was really like a disregard that I believe is on purpose. There's no way he didn't know. I mean, he was freaking Y Combinator CEO. It's not like he hasn't heard about other privacy issues that have gone on. This was like, in my opinion, just a decision that we want to get to market as fast as possible to win the AI, tech race, and we'll do whatever it takes to get there. And they did. And now it is kind of hard to put the genie back in the bottle, but they're the ones that did that, So to scream that, oh no, well, I have such existential, or there's existential harms that I'm certain that AI is, we need to prevent this, is like, a lot of chutzpah. You're the one that's actually causing the problems, right? So I am scared, but I'm not scared of AI as the technology per se. I'm scared about the unchecked powers that we're allowing to just use us as guinea pigs.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Bringing this out to market.
That's an interesting perspective. I like it.
Thank you.
I'm all good, Patrick.
I was going to ask Tim, do you have any more?
No, that's it.
I think I counted 4. You missed one. 5. So, Debra, this has been a fascinating conversation. For those in our audience who want to check out your podcast, where should they go?
Yeah, so you could go to wherever you get your podcasts. Just type in the Shifting Privacy Left podcast. But you could also go to shiftingprivacyleft.com. I have to do a better job of keeping up that site, though. I've had about 54 episodes out. Most of them are pretty technical. It's for anybody, though, that wants to learn more about privacy tech and privacy engineering. I myself am not an engineer. So it's really about me asking, with my experience of seeing a lot over 18 years of privacy, is really asking more nuanced, hard questions where the rubber meets the road, not the high level, stuff or unpacking a new regulation, right? It's going to be something that is a little more technical. And so I think anyone could benefit from that. But I always keep the market for privacy engineers like that is my market that I'm trying to serve. And that if I'm in service to that market, then it will flourish. And so far that's been the case. So if you are somebody that would like to be a guest, reach out to me at Debra@shiftingprivacyleft.com. Or if you're interested in sponsoring, we are open to that as well. So
that's great. And I know you're a strategic advisor for, we didn't talk about some of them, but 4 or 5, 6 different entities. You can find those on Debra's LinkedIn profile and simply click on them to get more information. And you can actually engage with some of those organizations if you're interested in knowing more.
Could you give me a minute so that I could just list them? So Bravado, we talked about, is static code analysis for privacy to build privacy into products at scale. You've got SecuV, which is data discovery, mapping, rights management, and fulfillment. They do also privacy posture management because they're doing continuous monitoring of your data stores and internal privacy risk. And then Pravani, which is doing privacy posture management externally. So think it's different from, but think conceptually a BitSight or a security scorecard, but for privacy and with a lot more, like 1,000 points of data that they're looking at to determine your privacy posture and that of your entire business network. So that it's great for managing third-party risk. And then Privacy Quest, which is a gamified, gamified platform, the playground for privacy engineers. It's kind of think a CTF, capture the flag style competitions, but for privacy engineering and really upskilling both lawyers to understanding privacy engineering, but also upskilling engineers to understand privacy engineering. And so if you're interested in any of those, check those out as well.
Oh, that's great. Those are some really interesting endeavors. So I encourage your audience to check each of those out. And if you would like to watch other Kitecast episodes, you can go to kiteworks.com/Kitecast. Thanks for joining us today, Debra. We appreciate your time today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks.